Okay, I guess we shall start first so that we can actually keep on time. So just to introduce, good evening, everyone. My name is Yao. I'm from Singapore Institute of Management Malaysia Rep Office. Thank you so much for joining us today this evening for our week 1 of our Career Month series. So today we're going to touch on the career in psychology. Okay. We have 2 segments for today. The first segment will be by the University at Buffalo panel discussion led by Dr. Kevin McKelvey, Resident Director of University at Buffalo for the undergraduates program at SIM. He will be the moderator for the first segment, along with 2 of our panelists, Dr. Thomas Saltsman, and also the visiting faculty from UB Department of Psychology. And also another of our panelists will be Mr. Jeremy Chian, alumnus of SIM-UB, currently pursuing his doctorate with University College London. Okay. The second segment will be presented by Ms. Lim Chiao Ki, Director of Transformation Office at Source Health, a non-profit community-based mental health center that provides accessible, professional, and also affordable mental health services to the public. So just some house rules, okay? I noticed that some of you, the speakers are on. So just to have some house rules, please ensure that you're muted for each segment until we open up for the to the floor for any Q&A session later on if we have the time. And if you have any questions during the segment, okay, please feel free to write them in chat and we shall address them if we have sufficient time. And just to inform everyone, this session is actually being recorded. And without further ado, please allow me to bring in Dr. Kevin McKelvey to start off the first segment. Dr. Kevin McKelvey, please.
Okay, so thank you, and hello to all of our friends and people who are joining us in Malaysia or anywhere else. Hello to my wonderful colleagues here in Singapore as well. And thank you for inviting me to participate in the panel this evening with Dr. Saltsman and Jeremy. I'm Kevin McKelvey. I'm the resident director of the SIM-UB program. And after we have finished with our panel discussion, I'll have a few minutes just to say a kind of an overview of our program and what we offer here with a focus specifically on psychology, but just so that people who are keen to learn more about our university will be able to know about that. I want to spend most of our time tonight, though, of course, focusing on the expertise and experiences of our 2 speakers, who are Dr. Tommy Saltsman and Mr. Jeremy Chian. So why don't we just start, first of all, by having them introduce themselves. Could you tell us, let's see, so we'll start with Tommy. Tommy, if you could tell us about yourself and tell us also what your connection is with SIM-UB and how you came to be here.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. My name is Dr. Saltsman. I did my graduate work at the University of Buffalo. So I've been affiliated with the University of Buffalo for almost a decade now. So I did my graduate work there and I was researching and teaching at the University of Buffalo. So I still teach courses with the home campus with Buffalo, but I also am part of the visiting faculty with Singapore.
Yes, and it's nice to welcome Tommy, Dr. Saltzman, to tonight's program because he is here actually physically in Singapore, although at the moment we are still conducting our classes mostly in an online format, but at some point we'll be back to face-to-face, hopefully sooner rather than later. Jeremy, could you please introduce yourself to us and tell us what your connection is with SIM-UB?
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all. So my name is Jeremy, and I studied in the University at Buffalo quite a long time ago. I graduated, I was class of 2012. So I did the psychology undergraduate there, and I did part of it in SIM, and also I went to the States for my last semester. So I thought that being here today would really give prospective students, an opportunity to ask any questions about the program, but also the experience, the UB experience. So currently I'm actually doing my graduate studies in the UK. I'm training to be a psychologist, in specific in educational and child psychologist. And yeah, I would love to really share with all of you, the progression to become a psychologist as well, and I guess I hope that, feel free to ask any questions if you have any. Thanks, Kevin.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. So I personally, I was a Russian major in college, and I learned a lot about psychology by reading the novels of Dostoevsky, which was quite interesting. But it is one of my regrets in life that I never studied psychology more formally. So I'm curious to know if Dr. Saltsman, maybe you can start first and share with us, what was it that caused you to become interested in psychology and led you into your current career?
Yeah. I think I've always been interested in human behavior since I was very young. I was always interested in why people do what they do, why they make the decisions they make, why they come up with biases and different beliefs, and then justify those biases and beliefs. And these were things I was constantly thinking about growing up. When I entered university, I became a psychology major because of this interest. And but I was also interested in a number of other topics as well. So I was studying biology, I was studying physics, I was in a pre-med program. I was studying some journalism. I was kind of all over the map. And it wasn't until I took my first social psychology course with Dr. Jennifer Bosin at the University of South Florida that I became just very fascinated by the field of social psychology. Basically, everything in the class was all the stuff I had been thinking about as a child growing up and into my adolescence, and it just really resonated with me. So I started working as a research assistant in her laboratory, and then I started working in various other research laboratories at the University of South Florida, one of which was conducting research that was very similar to what I ultimately wound up studying as a researcher and instructor today. So this lab basically was interested in how our psychological experiences shape our stress responses. So specifically, we look at different personality factors, different social situations that predict whether someone's going to have a relatively positive response to stress or relatively negative response to stress. And so this work used biological principles. So we used cardiovascular responses. It incorporated my passion for social psychology, and it really was a great fit. And that's how I came to research the topics that I do today.
Well, that's an interesting path. And I think it's worth pointing out for people in the audience that it is okay when you start university to be undecided. I certainly had many, many classmates who were in that category, and then just happened to take one class where maybe one individual professor could really be a turning point. So, but we're happy to hear that you found your calling there at South Florida with that one class. Jeremy, why don't you share with us your story of how you became interested in psychology?
Sure. I think like many others that are, that really are a little bit undecided in terms of what they want to do. I think for myself, from young, it was more of a personal experience, going through the whole school system and not really excelling in secondary school. And I guess, that really sort of prompted me to really understand, why was I not doing well? And therefore, I was really, just like Tommy, I'm very interested in like self-esteem, also thinking about motivational theories, in psychology, how would actually someone, be sort of achieve their fullest potentials, that self-actualization sort of part of things. So yeah, so I mean, I'm also a very curious person, and I really wanted to understand, similar to Tommy, how people react, why do people think a certain way, their experiences, and what trauma could bring to someone's life. So I was actually researching and found, that psychology is a really structured way where individuals can actually learn ways to really try to understand, listen, listening skills. When my sister actually graduated from UB as well, and so I checked out UB and I found, oh wow, what a great psychology course they have. and I pursued it, and I never regretted. When I was in UB itself, I completed many different courses, which until today, I still use those transferable skills, those knowledge. And I think one that really stood out was for me was developmental psychology. So because I really like how children and youth work, and I think the developmental psychology class really helped me to see things from a very research point of view as well. A lot of times you can just come up with a theory. However, these theories or this research evidence has been tested again and again and again in order for them to actually basically something that people can use across all populations, or can be generalized. So yeah, so I think after I graduated from UB, I think just like many graduates, I was a little bit unsure which direction I wanted to go. But I found I struck gold when I sort of like worked at an early intervention center with special pupils with special education needs, and I realized that so much psychology can actually also bring to children with special needs. And since then, I pursued a doctorate. I did a master's as well in educational psychology. And then currently I'm doing a doctorate in educational and child psychology. And this really, helped me to really see how psychology can not only do the direct work, meaning, do that one-to-one work, but also thinking about changing systems around the systemic side of things, trying to change policies, that for well-being, policies that, help pupils really achieve, their fullest potential, as mentioned. So yeah, so Kevin, that is my, the reasons why I really like psychology, and I never regretted ever since. Thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing. And I think it helps to illustrate just how expansive the field of psychology is, comprised of so many different subspecializations and so on. So there are there are many paths into psychology, as we've seen, and there are also, once you're in psychology, many subcategories of types of psychology and many different applications as well, which we'll talk about in a minute. So as far as the two of you, currently, you're both involved in academics. However, we've been hearing quite a lot in recent times after the past year living through a pandemic. Many people living through stressful situations. I think a result of all of that has been more attention to the psychological field and a growing interest in the different kinds of opportunities that might arise for people in one area or another. But it's not limited only to treating patients and dealing with sort of abnormalities. So maybe you could each just share with us what are some of the other things that you think of that would be, if somebody were to get a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology, what are some of the other career paths that they might head into besides either academia and research, or something that would involve specifically dealing with patients?
Yeah, I can start. Yeah, I think it's a great point. A lot of times people have this very narrow conception of what psychology is, and it's working directly with a patient, or it's someone sitting in an armchair talking about feelings. But it is a science, and there's a great deal of nuance and expertise that go into perfecting psychological theories and conducting research. But just beyond research, I think there are a lot of other opportunities that exist for students as well. Obviously, graduate work can open up additional opportunities, but even with a bachelor's degree, there are a number of different arenas in which psychologists could work. Psychologists work within businesses, as human resource managers, administrators, helping businesses, have their employees work efficiently and create good, positive workplace environments. You have psychologists in schools, you have psychologists in research centers, and you also have psychologists in government agencies and working with companies. So one area of psychology that has been growing exponentially, and I've seen it grow since I started graduate school, has been sort of data analysis, market research, user experience specialists, as well as experimental psychology within companies and not just in the ivory tower in academia, but working with companies like Facebook, working with companies like Instagram, Airbnb. I have friends who do this work and who work at these companies. And basically, these companies have a lot of data, and they are very interested in using that data and analyzing that data to make their products better and to make them work more efficiently for us. And it's not just companies like Facebook, but all companies are learning the really essential and the utility in having people who know about psychological theory and who can also conduct data analysis, know about research design. And these are all skills that you can gather from our program, and skills that I stress in my classes endlessly. I think other skills that are going to be useful for the workforce are communication skills, critical thinking skills, problem solving skills. These are also very heavily sought out by these industries, right? And these are also skills that are extremely useful in not only in these forums, but in life. So one thing I did want to mention is, outside of academia, I've also had some experiences working with a consumer neuroscience company called Media Science. And so basically what I was doing for that company was looking at different physiological responses and using people's physiological responses to predict what TV shows they were going to watch in the upcoming fall season. I think this was fall 2018. And so I was doing that work without a graduate degree, and that kind of work is certainly possible as well. So there are lots of options, lots of avenues.
Yeah, I think just to add on, sorry, Kevin, maybe I'll just jump in straight. I think just to add on to what Tommy has said, I think he definitely, in terms of opportunities during these COVID times, is, for psychology has really opened up. I think personally for myself, you see pupils that are having difficulties attending school, partly, because of the fear of getting COVID, but also, seeing their parents worried as well. It's almost like a chain effect. So definitely in terms of the educational psychology sort of scene, it has opened up, thinking about policy changes, thinking about, support for schools, systemic work, but also in terms of non-profit organizations, doing psychoeducation, supporting people, informing people that there are support, around for them despite the whole pandemic. So definitely, one area which a lot of psychology undergraduates go on when they graduate, they go to non-profit organizations, working with, from the youngest age group to the oldest age group. And I think also from a personal point of view, when you study psychology, some courses, for example, like counseling modules, really helps you to really use it in your daily life, be it your family members, be it your friends, these are all skills that you can use as well to support them through this whole pandemic. One interesting, one of my friends is a captain at Singapore Airlines, and he reached out to me about a few months ago asking whether I know anyone that would be suitable, a psychology graduate that would be interested to head up an aviation psychology team to support, airline crew to in terms of their well-being and to support them in terms of, giving them counseling. And when I looked up their website, and then I could see Singapore Airlines is actually developing a big team in terms of aviation psychologists. So even though, it might be an airline which you never thought, psychology, how does the psychology be part of an airline? I think this whole pandemic definitely has opened up people's eyes, and also people's almost normalized that feeling that it's okay to feel stress, it's okay to feel, sort of uncomfortable with the whole situation around, and with that brings opportunities in terms of people knowing that there are support for them. And so I think, yeah, definitely in terms of the pandemic, I would say a few things as well. Really psychoeducation. So a lot of psychology graduates actually go on to organizations to promote psychoeducation, and this really helps people to really understand their feelings, emotions, and thoughts as well, and to link them all up. So yeah, I think there are many opportunities. I think we probably get into that question later on. But I would say definitely in terms of psychology, standpoint, I think this has opened up lots of avenues. So yeah, Kevin, back to you.
Yes, thanks for sharing. Actually, so there are a lot of different subfields, as we've already heard. I think it's worth mentioning just the term industrial psychology as well, which is closely related to what Dr. Saltsman mentioned about human resource management and so on. That's, I think, quite a lot of our graduates tend to go in that area. Not all, I mean, they go in every different direction you can imagine. But there is a strong connection between the study of psychology and the study of business at our home campus. In fact, it's also worth noting that the two departments basically are physically located right next to each other in the same building because there's so much collaboration that takes place between the two faculties. And I think if you just stop and think about it for a few minutes, you will realize, is there any area of human activity that doesn't in one way or another involve human psychology? I can't think of any. So really it's a matter of finding the connection and seeing what the application of the formal study of psychology might be within any area of human activity. But let's go back to the whole notion of this. We're living through the pandemic. Before the pandemic began, we were already noticing many instances of students here in Singapore suffering from anxiety and depression, those two things in particular. I think that if you look at societies that are going through any kind of rapid social change, economic development, and so on, this introduces different kinds of stressors. And the pandemic has only served to accelerate and heighten all of that was already in progress. So I'm just curious to know now, from a practical standpoint, is there anything that either of you have learned or can share with what the implications might be as far as how people can deal with this, first of all, and in particular, for psychologists or people with psychology degrees, helping people to overcome this as we move into the post-COVID world, whenever that is, hopefully sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I think I mean, as you were alluding to, like these trends have been happening, right? And the data suggests that, particularly among youth, the depression and anxiety have been on the rise. I think in terms of what that means for psychology, I think that there's a lot of opportunity to do good and to help a lot of people in a lot of different ways. So all those careers that we were discussing have the capacity and the potential to help a lot of people, right? Whether that be conducting research that works on different treatment programs and investigates their utility, whether that be actually working directly with clients and helping them one-on-one. I think that there's going to be lots of opportunity for that, and I think it's an opportunity to do a lot of good. I also, one thing that I was thinking about is just the mental health services, as you mentioned, have been expanding, and there are lots of opportunities there, even digital opportunities. So things like Talkspace and BetterHealth, these organizations that provide counseling services online, have expanded drastically during the pandemic and will continue to do so. I think that there are also concerns with digitization and automation of certain jobs, and what the future of the workforce really needs are people who have a background in psychology and human behavior and have these soft skills and these practical skills that you can gather with a degree in psychology. I think more broadly, in terms of just difficulties that we might be experiencing with the pandemic, and this is from my own personal experience and things that I've been thinking about. But I think one area that really affects individuals is the amount of uncertainty, right? And the need to manage this uncertainty. Life is already very uncertain. We can't control all the variables and all the things that happen to us. But when something like COVID happens that throws in so many more variables than we're used to dealing with, so many more uncertainties, so many more question marks and just open-ended timelines, I think that our natural human impulse is to want to control aspects of that, or to control as much of it as we possibly can. And some coping mechanisms in that way are going to be more helpful than others. I know I've certainly gone down rabbit holes of YouTube videos and news feeds, just trying to gain as much information as I possibly can to prepare myself and protect myself from anything that could possibly happen. And though it's good to stay informed, it's also it's debilitating and overwhelming to take in all of that information all the time. So I often will try to I'll tell people to focus on what they can control and taking the bite-sized actions that they can in their everyday life, and here and now, what can I do right now to help combat this uncertainty, right? Just sort of taking back the certainty one step at a time. And it can be a small action, but we have to control what we can and try to live with what we can, right?
Great points.
Yeah.
I think, for those of us who live in Singapore, which is probably one of the most predictable places in the whole world, that it really has been made very clear to us just how uncertain life is and can be as a result of this pandemic over the last year. So yeah, that is a cause of great stress for many people. Jeremy, anything else to share on that topic?
Yeah, I think Tommy covered a lot, but I think what I would add is for people to really, surround yourselves with really good people around you. I think, the social side of things, especially with the whole pandemic, people have been almost robbed from social opportunities. So I think definitely, when it's safe to do so, I think it's really important to stay in touch with people around you, be it from phone or Zoom, and really, I think this really helps you to be able to feel a sense of belonging as well. I think the sense of belonging side of things, when I work with pupils that are finding anxiety a really big issue. That's my doctoral research, actually looking into emotional-based school avoidance and how anxiety actually impacts school performance, school attendance. And so I think definitely the whole pandemic has definitely almost escalated the whole situation. And I often tell schools that consult with me that I think it's very important to create a sense of environment that to normalize stress as well. To normalize stress in the sense where despite always trying to think about goals and aims and purpose and expectations, sometimes it's okay not to be okay, and it's okay to be really honest with where you are. But it's also very important to also have that ecosystem that supports the child, supports the people around. So I would say that definitely what I would say or advice is really to plot yourself almost on a blank sheet of paper, draw yourself to support people around you. What are some of the triggers from anxiety, what are the things that actually are impacting your function, your daily function. And I think once you actually see that, then you can actually then start to have that control, almost have that connectedness, autonomy to almost change the things around you. At the same time, I think psychology, a lot of psychology graduates are doing very good work in terms of in the community, in terms of research, to really try to expand, to give advice and guidance in terms of how people can actually cope with anxiety and stress better. So I think definitely still also, I think Tommy has mentioned that to really be very proactive in terms of looking for ways and tips to really overcome stress, anxiety, but also at the same time just make sure that you find a good friend, a good person, a good family member that you can actually share your personal feelings, thoughts, and emotions as well. So I think definitely tying everything in together, the psychology graduates coming up doing really good work. But also at the same time, I think you don't know how much strength you have, the resilience you have, until you really, you're in this pandemic. And then when you look back, you just realize, oh my goodness, I've done so much, and you should be very proud of yourself. So that's what I have to say, Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can be very proud of what we've learned through all of this, and recognizing, even if it has been difficult, we have been able, maybe not every single person, but just collectively, certainly within our program, I look at how resilient and resourceful people have been, and really coming together as a community. We'll come back to that in a minute, but let's, another question specifically for Tommy, which is, a lot of your own research has to do with people making choices and how they make them. So I'm just curious if you would like to share with us anything you've learned from your own research that could help people in making a decision of the kind of gravity of choosing which college to study at, what to major in, and so on.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, these are all really important and big decisions. And we live in a world where we have more of those decisions all the time. We have more options at our fingertips um, with the internet and such. But yeah, so this research that I conducted looking at decision making was largely about the phenomenon called choice overload, where it's basically this idea that in the modern world, we have way more choices than we've ever had to deal with as humans, right? Everywhere you look, whether it's Netflix or whether it's um, anywhere else, you have uh, thousands of options potentially to sift through for very simple things. A lot of the research looking at choice overload has been conducted looking at very, simple decisions throughout the day, but we've also done some work looking at more impactful decisions and how that might work. But basically, this work argues that when we have all these options at our disposal, we tend to gravitate toward those choice sets. We want as many options as we possibly can get because it maximizes our chances of getting something that's actually suitable and that we like. But the problem is we're not very good at dealing with those situations, right? And just cognitively, it's a lot to bear and it can be overwhelming. And so research argues that although we tend to approach these really large choice sets, once we get there, we're much less likely to actually make a decision. And we actually wind up being more regretful and less satisfied with whatever we get, right? And so what I did in my work was tried to bring that into our stress lab and tried to figure out what are people actually experiencing in the moment when they have to make these decisions. And largely what we find, and I think this resonates beyond the stress lab, is that we tend to view these decisions as being extremely self-defining, particularly when they're very important decisions, right? We worry about if I make the wrong choice, what is that going to say about me and who I am, and what are other people going to think about me and who I am? So we generally find that people tend to be very motivated in these situations where they have a lot of options at their disposal. Their hearts are beating harder and faster. They're highly engaged when they have to make these decisions, but they also show these negative cardiovascular patterns that suggest that they're not very confident in their ability to make a good choice. So it's sort of this paradox where we feel like it's very important to make a good choice, but we don't feel like we can quite get there, right? In terms of big decisions and dealing with those situations, I think there are a couple things to keep in mind. The first is it's very easy to creep into that fear of regret, and that if I choose something, something better might come along, and you get into that desire for the perfect option because you view these decisions as very important and self-defining. I think it's important to take the pressure off yourself a bit. Try to enter these situations with just a few clear guidelines and ideas of what you absolutely want from this choice and what you absolutely do not want from this choice. And just making it as easy as possible to sift through the options. It's easy to get rid of options that don't work if they're all automatically non-negotiables. But if you can do that, I think it can instill some confidence that you'll make the right choice. And at the same time, acknowledging that there is no perfect choice and you have to kind of use those rules going forward to make the best possible choice you can in the moment. And if something else that is potentially better comes along, that's okay because you made an informed choice, right? And I think that's all we can do, right?
Yeah, actually, thank you. And just thinking what the implications would be for a person choosing a school or a major, it's making the choice. It's not binding necessarily, especially for people who are choosing to study within the American system. There's a great amount of flexibility. So, but I think that's great advice about maybe coming up with a sort of a scheme of the, what do you prioritize? What are you looking for in a school? And that could vary greatly from one person to another. Are they looking for a big school or a small school? Are they looking for an urban environment or a more rural environment? Are they looking for a research orientation? Are they looking for a teaching orientation? So many different ways you could divide it up in order to basically narrow down the field in a quite dramatically, possibly. Well, thank you for sharing, Tommy. A question now for Jeremy is about your own experience, having studied at UB, and you completed the Bachelor of Arts in Psychology program. What can you share with us? What did you find to be the attractive features of that program, and what do you think students from Malaysia might also be attracted to within it?
Sure. Thanks, Kevin, for the question. I think just to touch on Tommy's research, I think it was really good research. And I think one thing I would say that when I was making this informed choice in terms of what I was going to study, there's so many universities around the world, but why UB? I think the most important thing is really to revisit your core beliefs. Why are you doing this course for? And I think when I personally, when I look back and reflect on my own experience, I think the 3 core beliefs that I have was, number one, I wanted to help people. So I thought that psychology psychology is almost meant to try to help people in some way or another. So I think definitely that was one. So I think the UB box in terms of the psychology, learning that there's a really good international psychology program so close to me, but also there's an opportunity to go to the US for a semester or 2 semesters, really helped me to make my choice. I think the second thing as well, sometimes in Singapore, sometimes or Malaysia, we can have one perspective on things because, we're not open to the world, So I think doing an international degree in Singapore itself really helps not only the people around, helps me as well to think about it in a different dimension, think about psychology in a different way, but also at the same time, being very close to my family. I was quite young at that point in time. I think I was 18, 19. So I felt like, being around my family was very important as well. But also, I had the option to go over to the US, once I finished my core subjects. SIM itself, I think if you visit the campus, you know that it's a really nice environment. SIM, I think as we all mentioned, anxiety and depression has been has been rising quite fast. And within SIM itself, I think they have a counseling department. So pupils, if they struggle with anything, not just academics, they can always, book an appointment to see a professional there. And I thought that was a really good feature as well, especially when I had friends that, they were struggling with coping with life in general. And having that counseling department ready, always there for you, I think that was one big attraction for me. And also, I think the student community at SIM is very diverse. Even though we're in Singapore, there are many international pupils. I made really good friends from India, made really good friends from the US. Some of the pupils from the US campus as well, they do a semester in Singapore. And it's really nice because I think then, you get to learn about different cultures, learn about, different things that, you usually do on the weekend, not just as the same friends. So I would say that SIM has a very diverse community. Electives as well. I think Tommy, as mentioned, he's facilitating quite a few very interesting modules. I'll leave Tommy to share that with you. But I think during my time as well, there were not any other program, at least I am confident of saying that in Singapore and Malaysia, that really allows you to have that kind of variety of courses and modules. I did sports psychology, for example. I did so many different subjects: child development, developmental psychology, and I think within the program itself, it allows you not to. I think Kevin has mentioned earlier that the business school really works very closely with the psychology school. But I think not just the business school. I think in terms of the sociology department, the communication department, I took so many modules. Things like, for example, history. Learning about the history. Really helped me in terms of general knowledge today. When I meet someone, it really helps me to engage in a conversation as well. I did music. I did music. I'm not a musician. I'm not very good in music. However, I learned the fundamentals of music and how that actually. I think within psychology itself, when we watch a drama or a movie, for example, why do we feel emotional? I think a lot of psychology graduates can take on these skills to go on to their various jobs and really think about, oh, how do I engage with people? How do I change people's behavior? How do I help them to feel a sense of, how do they relate to their movie as well? Advertisements as well. When you look at advertisements around, I think there are a lot of psychology graduates that actually go on. I have friends that did psychology and they went on to advertising companies. They use their psychology knowledge. How do I attract people? How do I bring their attention? How do I, how does this thing stand out to the general public? So I think, yeah, definitely the UB program, I think number one for me, the diversity of the people that you will meet, the faculty as well, the faculty of staff as well. Tommy, for example, he has, so much knowledge from the US, bringing that knowledge to Singapore. And also you have a mix of, some of the local lecturers. I think it's quite a good mix because you also learn so much from them. And I mean, in terms of myself, a lot of times when I speak to other undergraduates from other universities, they don't remember anything, even their tutors and their lecturers' names. I remember all my lecturers' names. I built a really good relationship with them. I think one feature was also, after lectures, they set aside, I think it was 15 or half an hour, where you can actually consult with your lecturers, if there's anything that you struggle with, be it, difficulties in your team for assignments, be it group work, be it personal issues regarding to the module. I think the lecturers are always there, always there to really give you that kind of support. So I think I felt very supported as I was going through the UB program. I managed to engage with so many different modules. I think, Tommy, you were saying that, people like that kind of options, of course, limit yourself and also be very, very clear about your core beliefs. But however, having said that, if you are someone that really likes options, really like to explore different things before deciding on something, I think the UB program is best. I think it's really, I wouldn't say best, but I would say it will fit your hopes and aims. So yeah, Kevin, I'm not sure whether anything else. I wanted to also say that Buffalo is a really beautiful city. During winter, my friends and I from Singapore and different parts of the world, we were playing with ice and snow, and there was a really, I mean, if you come to London, for example, you get rainy days every day. But if you go to Buffalo, you get to play on it's quite a memorable experience as well. And the US itself is massive. So when you get to travel at some point, you get to. I went to Chicago. It was totally different from Buffalo. I went to Boston. It was also a different place as well. So I think definitely US itself, within US itself, is also quite cheap to travel. So I would say that the UB program really helped me to see life in a different way. So yeah, Tommy, I don't know whether you want to share about some of the modules that you are leading as well.
Oh yeah, sure. So I teach course right now. I'm teaching a class called Mind-Body Connection in a Social World, which is basically a class where we study how the social environment affects our physiological responses to different situations. So we talk a lot about stress. We talk a lot about managing different kinds of social interactions and different personality factors that impact people's bodily responses. In the fall, I'm teaching a class called Mind and Machines, which is basically, it's a cyber psychology course where we talk about social psychology in the newly sort of emerging digital space.
Very exciting, right? Kevin, back to you.
Thank you for sharing. And in fact, I think what we can do now, I'll see if anyone in the audience has any questions. Now would be a good time to ask. I'm going to share my screen actually so that I can just show, I have some slides here, but I do want to point out about the particulars of our psychology major. And let's see if I can do this correctly. There we go. Okay, so I have some information here about UB. I have some information about our program in general, but this is what I wanted to just make sure everybody who's keen to learn about has a chance to see. It is just one of the interesting things about our psychology department is the single largest, that offers the biggest major of all of the undergraduate majors. There are about well over 100 majors, and psychology is the biggest one. And part of that is because, as we have mentioned, if you get a degree in psychology, you can go in many, many, many different directions, whether it's actually into psychology and research, academia, or the treatment of patients, or into something more applied, such as business, marketing, industrial psychology, and so on. Many, many, many possibilities. And so many students choose that because it does have such great flexibility. If you join the major, you would have to take a set of prerequisite courses. Tommy mentioned about how people come out of this degree with excellent skills in research, in statistics, in research methods, and critical thinking. And all of that is very foundational to what is a social science degree. Having completed those courses, you also take at least one course. You can take more if you choose, but you have to take at least one course in these 4 substantive areas of clinical, social, cognitive, and behavioral neuroscience. So this gives, at the undergraduate level, people a very sort of big picture of the different subfields within psychology. And as a result of that, it informs your choices as to what you want to take at the next level, the 400 level. Maybe you gravitate out of your interest in social psychology. If you have more of an interest in how the brain, the nuts and bolts of how it works, and so on, you might go into a more something like cognitive psychology. So all of these things lead up to a degree in psychology. You are required to take 300-400 level courses, but you can actually take many more than that. That's the minimum you would need to get the degree, and many of our students choose to add in as many 400 level courses as they can in various areas of psychology. That's especially true of our students here in Singapore and from Southeast Asia. But personally, I would say it's also worthwhile to take courses outside of your major. You can take electives in any number of other courses, departments as well, once you reach the upper level. And if you complete your UB degree program, just to mention, what we offer here in Singapore is accelerated, and it's finished in 3 years. If you go to Buffalo, you would normally take 4 years to do it. So there are advantages to studying here in Singapore if you're in a hurry. Unlike the British system, there's nothing called an honors degree, but if you perform very well, you can graduate with what's known as Latin honors, which is just something that would appear on your transcript, on your diploma, that shows that you were an excellent student. And so when you finish with a very good GPA, you are eligible for that. And you're also eligible to join an international honor society that you have to apply to, but we do offer membership in Psychi International Honor Society for people who specialize in psychology. So those are just some of the highlights of our psychology program. And with that, we are very quickly approaching the end of our time. Let me just ask if there are any questions from anyone in the audience. Apparently not. So therefore, I'll Tommy or Jeremy, any last words to say as we conclude our program today?
I just want to say thank you so much for having me, and I just to echo the things that you both have been saying about this program. From my understanding, in terms of the region, you get access to so much in this program, and you get to, one thing that I've been trying to do as an instructor here is try to open up research opportunities. I want to hold a research fair this summer. I have research assistants. And I do think, just from my experiences here, this is one of the only programs where you can get that kind of experience with faculty members. So I really value my time here, and I appreciate everyone listening. And thanks so much for having me.
Well, we're delighted to have you here too, Tommy. So thank you so much. Jeremy, anything to add?
I just wanted to add, because I think you showed the slide earlier. I think I just want to reassure everyone here that, the UB program has an academic advisor that can really help you to look at things as well. It might look very confusing, especially when you're not in the course yet, but they'll definitely give you step-by-steps of guidance in terms of what you need, the core subjects you need. So definitely don't feel pressured in terms of which subjects I need to take, because these will all come to they will all fit together when you start the course. I think the second thing I also wanted to say is that SIM itself, has a lot of CCAs, a lot of extracurricular sort of activities where you can pursue as well. So I think that was one of the things which I probably missed out earlier, but that was really a big attraction for me because I was part of a track and field team which we competed, with other universities as well. So it really helped me to really feel a sense of pride as well, coming up to graduate from both UB, but also a graduate of SIM. So it's almost like you're having 2 feet on 2 worlds. So I know Tommy wouldn't recommend that, but I would say that definitely, you have 2 identities, but also the 2 identities are really solid identities. So I think definitely, the UB program, SIM program, I would say that, as a graduate myself, I would say the teaching, number 1, is really good. Second thing as well is you really get not just academic experiences, but life experiences from it as well. So I just want to thank everyone for listening as well. Thanks, Kevin and Tommy. Really nice to meet you guys. And hope you have a good evening.
Well, thank you, Jeremy, and thank you for sharing all of those wonderful things. I could talk for hours and hours and hours about all of the wonderful benefits of our program here. We don't have time for that, so we'll just end now. I've put up on the screen. If you do have any questions about any of the particulars about our program, my colleague Samantha, whose email address is shown here, is always very happy to help. So thank you to the sponsors of the event for inviting us, and enjoy the rest of the show.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Kevin McKelvey, and also the panelists. A very insightful sharing on psychology in the education sector. So since we do not have enough time for questions, don't worry. You can actually email us your questions and we'll direct them to the panelists and also to the university partner so that we can address them accordingly. All right, so don't worry. So thank you once again, Mr. Dr. Kevin McKelvey, Dr. Thomas Saltsman, and also Mr. Jeremy Chian for your time. Can we have some silent claps in the chat box, please, so that we can actually show appreciation for that time? Okay, up next for our second segment, we actually have Ms. Lim Chao-Kee, Director of Transformation Office at Souls Health, to share about organization of her organization, what services they provide, and also some insights about current landscape in psychology industry. Okay, please, Ms. Lim, are you here?
Yes, I am here.
All right, Ms.
Yao.
Lim Chao-Kee, the floor is yours.
Well, I feel like I have quite a high bar to lift up to. There were 3 speakers before that really sold the UB program. Even I wanted to sign up. And I was like, where do I sign up for this UB program? Even though I already have a basic psychology degree, I'm actually doing a master's right now, but they made it sound so attractive. Even I got sold. So thank you, Yao, and thank you to SIM for inviting me today. As indicated by Yao, I represent Souls Health. Souls Health is a not-for-profit organization that works in the mental health sector in Malaysia. So I'm going to put my screen up because I prepared some slides today. And I think it's also worth noting that I do have content on the slide. So if the slide's not moving, please unmute yourself and let me know. At one of the career fairs for a different university, I went for 35 minutes talking on my end, and I could navigate through my slides, but the audience actually wasn't seeing anything, and nobody spoke up until 35 minutes into the talk. So I was thinking I was actually doing this amazing job with all my animation and everything, but nobody saw it. Okay, so right. So once again, my name is Chao-Kee, and I'm the Director of Transformation Office for Souls Health. And I'm here to talk to you a little bit about what we do and what types of work that we actually provide, services that we provide to the community, and also the type of people who actually come work for us. So what we will cover today, a little bit of introduction about who we are as an organization, what we actually do, and also some key trends that has emerged since COVID-19 swept across the world. And this has been something that it's a bit of a bittersweet experience. And I'll talk to you guys about that in a little bit. What career opportunities are available with us, what we look for when recruiting for future employees, and how you can prepare yourself for the industry. So just as a start, we were established in 2015 as a not-for-profit organization under SOL's 247 Foundation. And the story was like Alicia Osman, who is currently our managing director, founded the program. At the time, it was known as the SHIELD program, and it literally started with her as a one-woman show. So I really like to share this story about how in the early days of SOL's Health, when the center was located at Sungai Besi, and she was one of the very few qualified therapists who was working there. And one day she was preparing the room and the reception area for clients who are coming. So she was mopping, and she had a client who had a little bit of an anxiety problem and arrived 45 minutes before her appointment time. So Alicia basically told the client to take a seat, and she said, "Oh, just take a seat, your therapist would be with you." And then she proceeded to sweep the floor, and after she was done sweeping and cleaning, she went to the back room and changed into something more appropriate and came out and introduced herself as a therapist to the client. So that was one of the anecdotes that I found really funny, because we've started with literally one person, and now we are a team of more than 80 people. So we're located in Sungai Besi. We actually have a center there with therapy rooms and also a playroom for children therapy. Our focus is on providing mental health services to underprivileged communities in the Klang Valley. And we also have advocacy and research work that helps to destigmatize mental health, especially in Malaysia. So most of you would probably be quite familiar with the fact that mental health is quite taboo in Asian communities, especially in Malaysia. So part of what we do is try to educate the public about what mental health is, and at the same time, destigmatize what mental health is in the community. So we are going through a very exciting change at the moment. So from 1st of July this year, we will actually be operating as a social enterprise under the name Thrive Well. So the reason for that is that the SOL's 247 Foundation has decided to reduce their activity and given us an option to go independent. And we decided to go independent, and hence the exciting change. We will be providing similar services by all the same people, just under a different name, and we will be looking towards expanding our services in the future. So what do we do? There are pretty much 4 types of services that we provide to both private clients, private individuals, and also to the public. The one that I want to start talking about is community development. So this is probably one of the most least understood or least spoken of area of work that psychologists get to take part in terms of career fairs, in terms of career advisors talking to graduates or students about prospective career pathways. So community development is one of those things that people kind of think about as social work, but it's actually a lot more than social work. So we have a few community development programs, and our flagship program, Kami, is one that we developed 2 years ago, based on the Strengthening Families program that was evidence-based and developed and used in America. So we adapted that into the local context, and then we called ourselves Kami. So it's actually based on a Malay acronym. And what this program does is we develop pretty much a 3 to 4 month program where we go into underprivileged community, and these are usually the lower socioeconomic communities. And we run weekends extensive for families and entire families. So we're talking about parents and their youth, so children, to be part of a skills-based workshop session. So we have separate sessions for parents. We also have separate sessions for the children, and we teach them skills in terms of emotional regulation, how to basically voice their feelings assertively yet respectfully, and also, like especially in children within families, emphasizing the importance of taking responsibility and also being able to communicate how they feel appropriately, and teaching parents skills to actually cope with stress, anxiety, and all that during a very difficult time in their family situation. So our Kami program has been going for approximately 2 years now, and it's one of our fastest growing programs because under the community development program, what tends to happen is companies or sometimes even foundations have corporate social responsibility funding that they would like to devote towards developing communities. And we find that our Kami programs has been one of the fastest growing ones, where we see a really rapid change in the social development within the communities that we work with. So the youth and the families that have gone through our Kami program are great champions of the program. They themselves become leaders within the community, and they also try to, set example for their local communities and encourage them to take part in our Kami program so that they themselves can experience the benefit of learning all those life skills that like all of us should have, as we grow up and navigate through life. So that's the Kami program. Our other community development program is the BRAVE program. So the BRAVE program is something that we deliver in conjunction with Women's Aid Organization, WAO. So the WAO works with survivors of domestic violence in Malaysia. And what we do is we are the service provider to WAO. We provide therapy services to the survivors of domestic violence that have been case managed by WAO and also require a little bit of support in terms of what they've been through. And then, the children also may need a little bit of psychosocial support as well. So they come to us and we provide them a safe space to help them work through the traumatic experience that they've gone through. So these are the two key community development programs that we've been delivering for the last few years. And there have been spin-offs from these ones. But for now, these are pretty much the ones that we spend majority of our time on. So the next part of our service line is in terms of providing services to private clients. So these are basically therapy services to the general public, to individuals, couples, or families. And because we are basically making mental health services accessible to the public, we do charge a lower rate compared to private centers. And because we don't want the financial barrier to be a barrier that people have to overcome in order to access mental health care. So people who have, either earn lower income or they are students or just basically have financial issues come to our center to get therapy services at a substantially subsidized price. So we have seen a rise in demand for our therapy services, especially in the last year. And this I'll talk a little bit about in the COVID-19 pandemic. The next bit that we do is research. So our research team is fairly new. We've had the research arm within the organization for about 18 months now. And most of the grant funding comes from organizations such as, like part of the division of Islang or the government or some other non-governmental organizations. And our most recent research effort is in postpartum depression. So the report of that has just recently been released. And we will be talking about it on BFM. If you're in KL, tune into BFM in the coming week, because we will be talking about the findings from our postpartum depression research on BFM and talk about the Malaysian context specifically. So our research is very focused on the Malaysian context because we find that most of research that's published tends to be in what in psychology we call the weird countries, Western, industrialized, educated, rich, and democratic countries. So, and this is something that's probably quite talked about in the profession itself, but not well known to the general public, is that, most of the time when we want to adapt tools and therapy intervention to the local context, we need to go through a rigorous process, evidence-based, scientific-backed protocols to make sure that those interventions actually is effective on the local communities for a lot of different reasons, cultural differences, also, cultural norms and language, a lot of differences around how some therapies that have proven to be effective in Western countries may or may not have the same effect in local culture. So our research arm pretty much focus a lot of research on the Malaysian context so that we are actually providing evidence-based type of intervention or research that's actually really applicable to us as a community, because it is based on our local culture, our norms, our language, and our people. So finally, the other part of our research arm is advocacy. And advocacy has increasingly become a very important part of our organization, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic hit us, because a lot of what advocacy is about is talking about mental health openly with the public, having conversations about what mental health is and how do you spot symptoms of mental health, and also what's not mental health, and helping people overcome that negative association they may have with the terms mental health. So I definitely know when I was growing up, when people talk about mental health, there's always this perception of what we call Tanjung Rambutan, right? And Tanjung Rambutan is this elusive place that you go to if you have some psychiatric disorder, like if you're some lunatic. And mental health often has been portrayed that way. So we're trying to destigmatize that by actually talking about mental health as mental well-being instead. So our advocacy arm of the organization does a regular slot on community mental health on BFM Radio. We have a partnership with BFM Radio. And we also do contribute a lot of articles in, for example, the Star newspaper, in The Edge recently, we were being featured there, and occasionally Harian Metro as well. So that's just what we do in a nutshell. I won't go into the nitty-gritty of it because that pretty much summarizes and encapsulates the types of things that we do as an organization. So how has COVID-19 changed the industry? And I hate to say this, but the positive side that comes out of COVID-19 was that it has definitely catapulted the importance of mental well-being to the forefront of everybody's mind, because of what the earlier speakers on the panel has actually talked about. Like, people struggle with uncertainty, and not only that, in a lot of countries, especially across Malaysia and a lot of other regions as well, we have seen extended lockdowns being imposed on the community. So people, for the first time in their lives, are actually experiencing this forced social isolation. They don't go to their workplace as they normally do. They work from home, and they get children don't actually interact with their friends. They don't learn in a normal school setting. Instead, they are learning from home in a very unstructured environment. And so this has definitely put a lot of pressure on how people can cope within the environment. So when you think about it's on a normal day, big change is quite overwhelming. Imagine having big changes when there's a pandemic going on. So that's what's happened in the last 12 months, more than 12 months, 18 months actually. And we've actually seen this supported by lots of metrics. So the government set up a COVID-19 hotline, and about half of the calls, we're talking like hundreds and thousands of calls to this hotline, is for mental health support. Like, a lot of the time people are asking, they're struggling, they need to speak to somebody about how they can cope, and they're not, they're depressed and they're anxious and they just don't know what to do, right? And Talian Kasih is this hotline that's with the Kementerian Wanita. So it's this women's family and community hotline. And what they've seen is almost a 600% increase in calls in 2020 compared to 2019. So these calls are usually about family issues, so such as domestic violence, or people experiencing hardship in terms of needing help, social help in terms of food, accommodation, etc. So this is definitely a result of COVID-19 pandemic as well as the lockdown. And once again, WAO, our partner in working with domestic violence survivors, have actually seen a 340% increase in calls during the first MCO itself. So how has COVID-19 changed the industry? Well, it's definitely brought mental health to the forefront of everybody's mind. And increasingly, we are also seeing an increased political will to actually fund mental health services. So late last year, like we actually were approached to be a service provider for one of the programs that's been funded by Ministry of Finance to deliver counseling and mental health support sessions for communities within the B40 income range. So the government has acknowledged that the hardest hit part of the community is actually the lowest socioeconomic. So we were engaged to provide services to provide 700 sessions of therapy services to people who are really in need of mental health support. And we are seeing a lot more of this. And there's more and more requests coming through to us requesting for services to be delivered within the community, either through a state-funded program or a federally funded program or a local council-funded program. So there's definitely been an increase in appetite in managing mental health issues that's a result of the pandemic. But what we're also hoping is that this really is an opportunity for us to open up conversations around, what is mental health, what is lifespan mental health? And it's not really just about depression and anxiety. There's a lot more that we can do. And with the things that we do in our community development programs, such as Kami, we're really looking at the preventative part, helping people develop skills that they can use to help self-regulate, to help them cope, to help develop resilience so that they actually don't develop those kinds of what we call psychopathologies down the track. So now let's talk about Soul's Health, or at Thrive Well, as we will be known next week. There are different types of opportunities available with us, and I'll talk about each one for different levels of qualification. So there are different ways that you can work with us and different types of pathways for you to enter the organization, depending on where you are in your psychology career right now. So if you are an undergraduate, like if you're a second year or even third year, just during your semester break or even during semester time, like you feel like, look, I have time, I would like to get some work experience, you can join us as an intern. The minimum amount of time I recommend for internship is 3 months. I recommend 6 months, because if you come and do your internship with us for 6 months, you actually get to do a variety of roles while you're with us. And that kind of gives you a lot more exposure to what you may or may not like in the profession itself. So if you opt to do an internship with us and you have the time for it, I do recommend a 6 months internship, because you spend about the first month or so just getting assimilated into the organization, like getting used to work culture, meeting different people, finding out about how things get done. And it's really by the second or third month that you're really fully effective in the role that you're performing. So 3 months is really not a lot of time for you to get a sense of what this career is about in psychology. So 6 months is definitely my recommendation. It's definitely a better experience for you. And we have had people who, after their 6-month internship, actually stay on with us as volunteers, or we take them on as an employee because we think that they have all the qualities that we're looking for. So just as a note, like all our employees started off as volunteers, and we pretty much all have this passion and commitment towards this industry and also to the work that Soul's Health does. So that's one of the more defining qualities that we're looking for in our employees. So if you've recently graduated from university and you're kind of not sure what you want to do next, so we've had quite a few people coming to us who are kind of at that crossroads where they finished their undergrad, but they're not sure if they want to do a master's yet, or they're not sure what they want to specialize in. So they're kind of torn between, well, I'm not sure if I want to do a clinical psychology master's, or if I want to focus, on doing research, etc. What should I do? So the best answer for that is get some work experience, because you only find out what you like and what you don't like by actually doing the job itself. So for graduates, you can join us as a volunteer. And again, similar to the internship, we do recommend a minimum 3-month duration of volunteer. If you like to volunteer more, that's even better. So in recent trends, what we've seen is we not only get graduates come volunteer with us, we also have seniors who have retired from their profession volunteer with us as well, because they find this opportunity really meaningful, and it helps them stay connected with the workforce and also allows them to give back to the community. And the way our organization work is that we are very open, flexible, and supportive environment. So it's a great environment for people to work in without all the pressures that come with different types of, larger organizations that are kind of more profit oriented. So that's for the graduate. And now, if you've graduated from a master's program, say you've graduated from a master's of clinical psychology, and you need to get some training. So we have trainees join us, and they will get allocated supervisors for their time with us. So when they join us as a trainee, they start seeing clients, and they will have supervision sessions with their supervisors, and we also provide professional development support in terms of weekly sessions of training and case debriefing, etc. So if you're a graduate of a master's program and you're looking for a place to practice your skills and get some real world experience, you can join us as a trainee. And also bearing in mind that joining our organization will give you an opportunity to work with a variety of clients. So you're not really just working with one segment of the community, you're working with all kinds, like you're working with underprivileged communities, you're working with students, you're working with families and couples, etc. So that's the pathway if you've got a graduate of master's program. And now, let's say you've already graduated with your master's program, you're trained, and now you're a registered or you're a licensed practitioner, either a counselor or a psychologist. You can join us as an associate. So our associates are pretty much practitioners who work with us, but not on a full-time basis. We do have full-time clinical psychologists who are on our employment base, but associates are more of a contractual base where they sometimes choose to practice with us 2 or 3 days a week, and then they do other things elsewhere. For example, they may do research in a university for the rest of the time, or they may actually work in a different center in a different part of the city, for example. So associates are obviously, work with us on a contractual basis, so they are remunerated, but interns and volunteers are not. So just so you know. So what we look for in future employees, and like in the previous panel, I heard there were talks about all these different skills, problem-solving skills, etc., that a psychology degree would equip you for future employment. And I'm so glad that that was being brought up, because now what I'm going to focus on is a lot of what we focus on are a set of attributes and qualities rather than skill set. So my assumption is if you're smart enough to get into a psychology degree, you've got the brains and you've got the skills to be able to do most of what we do in our organization. So more important for me is a set of attributes and qualities that are important for us as an organization. So what we look for in future employees are flexibility and adaptability. So because we are quite an organization that does quite a wide range of things, so there will be times, and in fact, most of the times, employees will be doing different things. So unlike, for example, I came from a banking background. So when I used to work in a bank, the organization is so big that every person has a tiny portion in the process, in the value chain. So you literally only do one job, and that's the job that you do for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and 52 weeks a year. But in Souls Health, like our employees do a variety of things. You could be a project manager in a community development program, but you may also be part of the research team, like helping to analyze data that's been collected from a recent survey, for example. So of course, this is not enforced upon you. This is opportunities available to you. So there are a lot of opportunities for you to actually explore your different interests. So you're not really just pigeonholed into one type of job and in one team specifically. So what we really appreciate is people who are flexible and adaptable. A strong work ethic, so it goes without saying. I think all workplaces appreciate people who have strong work ethics, show up on time, you do what you are asked to do and what you commit to doing, and you deliver your deliverables on time and to quality. So majority of our workforce work remotely. So my entire team works remotely from wherever they are based. So we have no issues with a remote working environment. But what I do expect is that, you know, people attend team meetings and they do it on time. And that's just generally the culture that we expect from, and also the type of work ethic that we expect from people who come and join us. Proactive. So this is something that I think may or may not be a little bit controversial. So personally for me, like especially in an organization such as ourselves, our senior staff has to devote our limited attention to a lot of different things. So we don't necessarily are able to devote a lot of time to hand-holding of you know, interns when they join us. So we really appreciate, and I specifically really appreciate people who are very proactive, who kind of like can, you know, like think for themselves. Like if they've run into some challenges, they can try to solve the problem and first, and if they can't, then they'll find somebody else to ask for help from, rather than just sitting around waiting for people to tell them exactly what to do. A good communicator is important, and especially in a place where we all work remotely. So we're not physically co-located in an office. Therefore, good communication is paramount. A willingness to step out of your comfort zone. So a lot of what we do is not for the faint-hearted, especially in community development. You know, some of the things that you may see in community development might be something you're not used to, especially if you've come from a very affluent upbringing, you know, like because we do community outreach, we actually go into the communities and we interact with the communities there themselves. And you will see a lot of different things that may upset you, like people who are poor, big families living in very small confined spaces and things like that. So there's definitely need to be a willingness to step out of your comfort zone if you would like to work in some of the programs that we deliver. So finally, if any of everything that I've said really intrigued you, you can go to our website at soself.org/volunteer, and there are a variety of roles available there with a little bit of short description and some skills that are required for those roles. And there's also a form there that you can fill in that if you would like to volunteer or intern with us. So I really encourage you to take a look, because especially when you're still a student, it really is the opportunity for you to actually figure out what you would like to do as a career pathway. And the only way to do that is really getting in the trenches and actually doing it. You know, so theorizing it and kind of rationalizing it, doing a pro-con list would only get you so far. The actual benefit itself is actually really going out doing the work. And I'll share this story of one of our interns who have ended up being an employee with us. So she graduated from a university in North America, and she came back to Malaysia, and she did her internship with us at first for the first 3 months. And then, so at the time when she did her internship, she had the idea that she wanted to go on to do a master's to be a clinical psychologist. So that's kind of like the predefined life plan that she had for herself. And she was working in one of my teams, and she decided that she wanted to volunteer for one of the community development programs. So she basically volunteered to be the supporting team in one of the GAMI programs. And her experience through that program, supporting that program, really opened her eyes to like working in the community as a psychologist or as a mental health practitioner, and it really changed her mind about being a clinical psychologist. So she's since then, she's decided that she wanted to do something different, not clinical psychology anymore. And she's become really passionate about workplace well-being. And all that was through all the different things that she got to experience while she was working with us. She really got a taste of all the different types of work that a psychology degree allows her to do, and finally found something that she really feels congruent with her own values and her own belief system. So, like if you're kind of confused about what you want to do as a career path, what I really recommend is actually get some work experience. Like you can only get so far thinking about it and talking to people about it. The best way to find out is actually go do it yourself. So how to prepare yourself for this industry? Like I said, get as much work experience as possible. So, I don't think anybody would actually say that they are looking for somebody with as least work experience as possible. So if you have the time, even during your holiday, your semester break, if your semester break is 2 or 3 months, that's a great amount of time to actually use it just to be part of an organization. Like go in, find an organization that you want to volunteer with and go work for them, right? Like you will learn a lot of very good skills. You learn how to communicate with different types of people. You learn how to work as a team. You also learn how to present yourself. You'll become very articulate once you have to, talk in meetings and do presentations and stuff like that. And it's good to have those kinds of practice while you still can. So talk to professionals who are currently working in the industry. So industry trends change all the time because social context changes all the time. So if you've asked me 2 years ago, whether what's the psychology, what's the mental health landscape in Malaysia like, my answer would be very different compared to the answer that I've just given you today. So, it helps to talk to professionals who are currently working in the industry, because they can tell you, like our clinical psychologist can tell me, like I can actually go to the clinical director and ask her, what are some trends she's seeing? Well, she can just easily tell me, well, we have a lot more couples coming in because of the lockdown. A lot of couples are forced to spend a lot of time at home in a very confined space. And now they have to start negotiating responsibilities, right? Who's looking after the kids while they are doing work? Who's helping out with housework, etc. So what we're seeing is that now there's a little bit of a trend towards couples counseling, because couples are finding that they are hitting some strain in a relationship because they've been together in lockdown for too long. So this could be something that people say, look, we really need a lot more relationship experts right now. So that's kind of, maybe if you're already a practicing practitioner, that's something you might want to specialize in or develop some skill set for, so that you can actually better serve this growing clientele. So it helps to talk to professionals who are currently working in the industry. And the way that you get access to professionals who are currently working in the industry is by working. So for example, if you can't work with us, you will have access to 20 or 30 counselors and clinical psychologists that you can tap their shoulders on to say, hey, like, just want to have a quick chat about your experience as a psychologist, like really get a really good understanding from an insider's point of view. What are some challenges that come with the job, so you can, at least have the truth of it and going into the profession with your eyes wide open. Volunteer in a variety of roles. I can't stress this enough, because it's really useful to be a very well-rounded individual, because especially if you plan to see clients on a one-on-one basis, you will be working with people from a variety of background, a variety of circumstances, different types of contexts, also different types of personalities. So working in a variety of roles will give you a lot of exposure to all the different scenarios that will help prep you to be better clinicians as well. So I'll give you an example of one of the ladies who actually was volunteering with me. And she mentioned an example where she had a bit of an issue with a work situation at work. She works in corporate at work, and she really needed some help from a counselor. And what she said was, like, the first couple of sessions, all she was doing was really explaining to the therapist about what a corporate environment is like, because the therapist had never been in that environment, don't know anybody who works in corporate, and can't actually relate to a lot of the things that she was talking about. So she felt like she had to spend 2 sessions educating the therapist about what her work context and culture is like, before they were able to get into the crux of the issue. So, so it helps to actually get a lot of life experience or get as much experience as possible in a variety of roles so that you can relate to your client and see things from their point of view. And then that will position you to be a much better equipped clinician to help them as well. So if communication is not your strength, work on it now. And by that, I mean, like if you have difficulty speaking in public, you should start practicing, and if you kind of get nervous about talking as well, there are really some good videos out there to try to help you manage your anxiety or nervousness before you speak, or your language skills are just not up to scratch, then you should also work on that as well. Because communication is key, especially if you are going to be working with people to help them solve problems, right? So you need to really be able to understand what they're saying to you and also to be able to communicate yourself clearly enough so that they can actually receive the help that they need. Now, I've pretty much covered everything that I would like to cover. So I'm happy to take questions if there are any from the audience. And while I do that, I'll actually put up a slide about where you can find us. So we're fundraising at the moment. So if you're feeling generous, please head over to myminda.org. And there are some perks associated with donating with us. We are providing, like some incentives like mental health e-packs, etc. for donors. So feel free to go to myminda.org. And here are our contact details. So as I've said before, we are going through a transition period at the moment. So a lot of our communications like handles or, websites and all that will actually transition to a new one to support our rebrand. So that's it from me for now. I'm happy to take any questions if anybody have them. If not, I may actually give you some insights into some of what we've seen in recently in terms of trends in the mental health industry.
Thank you, Ms. Chowki, for sharing. We really appreciate all the insights in terms of soft health, in terms of what opportunities you guys provide, and also the landscape of psychology. What is it about? If let's say there's any questions from the floor, feel free to actually unmute yourself and ask. If not, you can just type in chat and we shall address the questions. If not, I may probably start with my own personal questions in terms of like understanding the organizations more. In terms of like, Ms. Chowki, you mentioned about remote working. I understand that you mentioned part of your team or department is also working from home or maybe speaking to clients virtually and stuff like that. So maybe you can share about the structure of how does it work. Would any clients actually maybe suddenly in the middle of the night actually reach out to your team to actually get consultant, or is there any like specific timeline that they need to follow and stuff like that?
So there are a few different ways for me to answer your question. So for our center clients, the individual clients who come to our Center for Therapy Services, they do on an appointment basis, right? And for the benefit of people who are not aware how therapy actually works. So when you're going to therapy for the very first time, what the clinical psychologist or the counselor would do is actually do a very detailed history taking. So they'll ask you a lot of questions about your background and, to basically identify some risk factors that they need to take into consideration, right? And then they're kind of based on what you've told them about your family history, your social contextual history, your upbringing, or maybe even some medical history. They'll basically make a risk assessment about, like, is this client considered high risk, medium risk, or low risk? So we do that as a standard practice. It's just what we do in a profession. And depending on your risk profile, we have different types of support that the clinicians know to provide. So some of our clinicians give out their private phone number as to the clients. And I think at the beginning of the pandemic, it was hard not to, because there were a lot of people who were just reaching out, needing help. So we are much better now in terms of scheduling appointments and helping them kind of cope between sessions, So that has kind of reduced over time. And we do tell them that if in the middle of the night, you are really in crisis mode, there's a number you can call, please call this number. And there's one hotline that's run by befrienders that's manned 24/7. So we do provide them with resources. And to answer your question about remote working, so my team is non-client facing, we all work remotely, but the ones that are client facing, our therapists as well, what we found that since the pandemic hit and we've had to move our services online, a lot of the clients actually get a better experience through getting therapy online. And part of it is there's a lot of reasons for that. I think it's also part of the environment, like they are in their own home, so they're comfortable. So, and it also saves people a lot of time in terms of commute, etc. But it's not for everyone. So for our survivors of domestic violence, for example, often it's really difficult because obviously they can't have therapy sessions at home if their abuser is also in the same home environment. So what they tend to do is they come to a center and we have a private therapy room where we do therapy sessions there. So we haven't been doing a lot of that during the MCO just because the health directive doesn't allow us. But when we've been granted permission to do it, we tend to do it with people who really need that space. So, you know, and there's also, especially from those in the lower socioeconomic background as well, like, you know, you might appreciate that they have huge families that are squashed into 2 or 3 bedroom flats. So there's no issue, no privacy whatsoever. So if they can come to our center and use the therapy services there, then we would encourage them to do so. If not, we do it by phone or we do it through the internet if they have access to internet. So basically, we try to accommodate whatever modes that works for them. Because at the end of the day, we are there to support them. So it needs to be something that they can sustainably use and also feel that they feel safely supported, you know, without threats or invasion of privacy from other people. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And we actually have one question from the floor, but he sent it, or she actually sent it privately. So just wondering whether the particular language, like for example, BM, is important for actually working with SoFal. For me, what I actually noticed that in SoFal, you actually target different races as well. Even for your website, you post blogs in different languages as well. So I think for your team, I believe they will want to reach as much people as they can. So I think maybe Ms. Chucky could actually share about the importance of actually having different languages as well.
Yeah, so it really depends on what you want to do. So if you only intend to see private clients, for example, like individuals, couples, and families, English is usually fine because most people speak English. But if you intend to work in community development, especially in our CAMI programs, then a Malay is definitely a must, at least a fluency, even if you're not like a super expert, because all those communities are not English speaking communities. So the people who work with us in community development must be able to converse in the Malay language. It doesn't mean that you have to be able to write like a Malay novel, like a national laureate novelist. It's just a basic conversational proficiency is necessary, like, and to be honest, like whoever speaks bombastically, right? Nobody speaks bombastically. You tend to get away with just slangs. And, if you can get by ordering food at Mama, then you can actually, be part of our community development team because conversational Malay is sufficient. And there's kind of no requirements that you have to write long essays in the Malay language or any of that stuff. So if community development is where you want to be, then a degree of Malay fluency is necessary. Otherwise, we do, as a team in an organization, we all communicate in English. The reason we have all these multiple languages on our websites and on our social media is we do want to reach to a wider community as possible. So like, obviously, the English-speaking community is is a lot more well-versed and educated about mental health compared to a lot of other ones. And the Chinese-speaking community as well, you'll be surprised to find that they're really very engaged with mental health. So we try to cater our content to as diverse a community as possible. But to work with us, you definitely need to have good fluency in English. And if you really want to work in community development, then you would need to know how to speak Malay.
Thank you, Ms. Chucky, for that answer. I believe that also answered the questions from for our participants that is interested in this field. So having said that, when you mentioned about earlier in the presentation about the mental health or mental well-being being in the Asian community, it's a really taboo topic that we have it previously. Just to want to have like a point of view in terms of like why is it so? Because I feel that in like the Eastern countries or the European countries, they are more advanced in these avenues to actually get support with. But for the Asian market or the Asian region, it doesn't seem so. Because I feel when we're young, we're taught to be like just strength to in terms of like whatever you do, you can't show your vulnerability. You need to just chiong everything lah. So that is why I think that built us in the sense that we are not aware of like mental health is actually something that we need to be concerned about. And also in my point of view, because of what the advancement of technology also, it helps to create awareness in terms of this. Then maybe you could share why it is so in terms of like the Asian market is slightly different compared to the more advanced markets.
Well, I think like this is my personal opinion. Okay, I'm not speaking on behalf of the organization. I need to qualify that this represents my personal opinion. So
Yep, sure.
like from my point of view, a lot of this is to do with our cultural norms, right? You know, as Asians, we tend to be a very stoic culture. Like you don't show your feelings, right? And I think like for most of us, especially our generation, it would be very hard pressed to find somebody whose parents are very openly affectionate with you, you know, who hugs you and who tells you, oh, I love you, you know, like I appreciate. It's really difficult to find that in Asian families because culturally we are just very stoic, you know, like we've never been very few of us grow up in an environment where emotions are very openly expressed. Therefore, that's kind of how it shapes our model of how we relate to the world, right? In terms of expressing our own emotions as well. So a lot of this is passed down generationally. But the thing that's really changing now is, like you said, you know, technology also really opens up the world, you know, and travel also opens up the world, right? Now people actually, when people travel a lot more, they get educated overseas and they see something that's different and that's something that they like. They're like, gee, why are we not like that? You know, like now you kind of, before that, you kind of like didn't know any better. It's like, oh yeah, that's just how we are. That's how things are normally. It's the norm and you accept it. But once you've seen something different and you see that, hey, there's actually something different out there. There are families who kind of operate differently, you know. So like for me, when I first left home, it was really a shock for me when I watched like parents hugging their children, right? Because my parents have never hugged me before. Even when I was leaving to go to Australia for the first time to study, at the airport, my parents were saying goodbye to me at the airport, and my dad tapped me on the shoulder and just like, okay, take care, and that was it, you know. And then I was off, you know. I went through immigration, got my passport stamp, and got on the plane. So when I saw this whole thing, this whole outward expression of, you know, like the mothers and the fathers hugging their children, say, oh, you know, like, you know, I'll miss you. And that was really new to me. I just thought, wow, okay. So families, there are families who do things like that, you know. So, and, you know, for us, it's probably a lot more open now because we watch television, Western television, we're educated overseas and all that. So that's obviously starting to change. But in terms of mental health, I think part of it is lack of an understanding of what mental health is. So during my presentation, I did talk about this Tanjung Rambutan thing, and it's a real thing because when I was growing up, the only concept I have about mental health is that you must be this lunatic that can't function and live on your own, that you have to be sent to a place like Tanjung Rambutan for somebody to look after you. And we characterize people with mental illness as people who are really crazy, like, you know, they're incoherent, they are aggressive, they harm people. So we have this negative association with the word mental health. But when you really break it down, mental health is really just about the state of health of your mind, right? So when you're stressed for a very long time, you're overstressed, and that starts impacting your ability to function normally, then that's where your mental health is starting to get affected. So one of the things that I find, especially in corporate, because I spent about 15 years of my career in consulting and then in banking. So I'm very, very experienced in this corporate environment. there's a little bit of a bravado in corporate culture whereby you like to compete how many hours you stay in the office. You know, you kind of think, oh, I stayed in the office until 2 a.m. last night. I went home and then I came back again at 6 a.m. this morning. Like it's a real competition, like it's a thing, you know, that people think that, oh, I only got 2 hours sleep last night, you know, but what they don't understand is, you know, that actually is one of the reasons why you have poor mental health. Sleep is a key cornerstone of good mental well-being. You need to get adequate sleep to actually allow you rest and rejuvenation, right? And then your body needs a certain period of time to rejuvenate. Your mind also needs a certain amount of time to rejuvenate. You know, sleep, lack of sleep is actually one of the most debilitating factors affecting people's mental health. And a lot of people who work in corporate would never even associate that with a mental health issue. They'll think, oh, you know, I'm just stressed, or it's just part of the job. I have a lot of work to do. I don't have the luxury to sleep in. But that actually contributes to long-term impairment of your ability to function, and that's already something to do with impairing your mental health. So when you put it that way, people kind of think, huh, not enough sleep also is a mental health problem. Then they kind of start thinking about mental health in a very different way, because you know, in people usually think of mental health as like those like schizophrenia, psychopathology type of stuff. But when I break it down, I was like, you know, like a very, like one of the earlier indicators of declining mental health is when you're not sleeping enough or you're not getting good quality sleep. You either can't go to sleep or you can't stay asleep. Like you wake up in the middle of the night, you can't go back to sleep, or you wake up too early. Those are all symptoms that your mental health is being affected. That's kind of the way that your mind is communicating to you to say that, hey, you need to, like, you know, take stock, pause, and really check how you are going in terms of your mental resources and stuff like that. So I think education is really, really important. Just really educating people about what mental health is and isn't. So, you know, all this talk about this Tanjung Rambutan thing, like those people represent a very tiny percentage of the population. The prevalence of schizophrenia, bipolar is a very tiny prevalence of the population. The larger prevalence is in stress, depression, anxiety. We're talking about double digits percentages of the population experiencing stress, depression, and anxiety. And so you can look this up in the stats if you want. And it's a lot more prevalent in women than in men, and for a lot of different reasons, right? But like the fact is that, you know, all these things that people kind of think is not kind of a big deal are actually affecting a lot more people in the population. And that's the bit that we really need to work to resolve, because if you kind of don't address things like stress, anxiety, and depression early on, they develop into something more serious, and then they progress along the severity into a more severe clinical psychopathology, right? So you kind of don't want to get to that. So which is why it's important to educate people about what mental health is and how you take care of yourself. And things are very basic. I kind of feel like this talks, it's becoming mental well-being talk. But you know, like some tips for free for people who are motivated to tune in today. So some of the really, really easy things, right, to help you maintain your mental health is get enough sleep. You know, get enough sleep. And one of the things that I keep emphasizing to people, especially if you really love your technology gadgets, right, power off 1 hour before you go to bed. Seriously, that will do you a world of good. It will help you sleep better. It'll help you stay asleep longer as well. And you won't get so what do you call, like your mind won't be so engaged, you know, and so active. So power off an hour before your bedtime, and have a nice bedtime, relaxing bedtime ritual, right? And helping getting good quality sleep is very important. Another one is exercise. So exercise is the most under prescribed medication in the world. Seriously, like if I was a doctor, I would write a prescription of exercise for everyone, because it's not only good for your body, it's actually good for your mental health as well. Try to get exercise about, you know, 20 to 30 minutes a day. It doesn't need to be about going to the gym. Just do something you enjoy. You know, if you like going for walks, go for walks. If you like to swim, go and swim. But just make sure you put some time in for exercising. That really helps. You know, and the third bit is social connection. right? Okay, so the like WHO did this huge research about all the factors of poor mental health in a lot of different countries. So two factors came out, like they kind of tie together for the same equal importance. The first one is material needs. So this is basically basic needs like food, shelter, clothing. So it goes without saying, right? You know, food, shelter, clothing, important for your mental well-being. So poverty is actually the biggest factor that creates mental health problems in a lot of countries. The next is social inclusion. So when people are socially excluded, it really affects their mental health. And we saw this during the pandemic, right? When you experience social isolation, when you're not connecting with your friends and we're not going out seeing people, people feel socially isolated, and that affects their mental health. So social inclusion is really important. So make sure that you have if you're kind of a bit of a loner type and you think that you're okay, I would suggest you kind of go out once in a while and, you know, like connect with your friends, because it's really important to have social connections and social support, healthy social support, not toxic types, but healthy types. So make sure you stay in touch with friends, you know, go out, see them, talk to your family. If you're on good terms with your family, talk to them on a regular basis, because all those things are really fundamental for your social well-being. They are protective factors against challenges in life, right? So, you know, when you're going through something really difficult, you'll find that it's not money or anything that solves the problem. It's having somebody who listens to you, who empathizes with you, and who are there when you need somebody to talk to or a shoulder to cry on. So social support, very important. So I've given you three tips for free, everyone. You don't I've saved you a couple of sessions in, like, you know, kind of therapy sessions. That's a few $100 right there. Right. So sleep, make sure you get enough sleep, exercise on a daily basis if you can, and social connection. And obviously diet is important. Okay. So some of the foods are I might want to tell you this or I might not. So there's this really unethical research that was done. This was before ethics was a thing in psychology. Okay. So they wanted to experiment on this specific type of acid amino, the impact of that on mood, right? So what the researchers did was that they recruited a group of participants and gave them their meals in the form of a shake, like a drink, right? But they withhold all the ingredients that contain this specific acid amino from the shake, because they wanted to see the absence of that, what that would have in terms of the impact on people's mood. And what the study found, that people at the start of the research, they weren't depressed, but by the end of it, they were all depressed. So there was a key ingredient in the acid amino in the food that actually helps manufacture chemicals in your neurotransmitter, like the serotonin and all that makes like your feel-good hormones. So when your body doesn't get those specific type of nutrients, you can't manufacture those chemicals in your brain, and you don't have it, so you can't feel good. So diet is also important. So I know it was a very unethical research, but it was a really good finding. It really, really actually gave you this evidence that diet does matter in terms of helping you actually have a good mood, and also help you to support your mental well-being as well. So I think
Yeah.
that's kind of like digress. We started talking about career, and now I'm talking about mental health tips. So,
I think it's good. Miss Yaki is no worries. I think it's good for our audience to actually know about these sort of like information as well. Like for example,
Yeah.
nutrition is also like playing a big role in terms of like getting your mental health well.
Yes.
Not just like physically you feel good, but it's just that it would just also translate into like what you think, how you feel, and stuff like that would also lead to mental health. And you also mentioned about having good sleep is also very important. So like for example, people work so many hours, but they just want to get that promotion and stuff like that, but they don't really take care of themselves. It's sort of like a layman terms called burnout in terms of like mental health, where they actually break down, don't know what to do in certain point of their life, even though they got this promotion. So these sort of things also, I think, in the public sector, they probably would need to like get more awareness about in terms of understanding what is worth and what is like not worth your actually sacrificing your mental health. Yeah. So and then back to your topic in terms of like Tanjung Rambutan, since young until but right now I feel that this perception is a bit less into the in the community in terms of the Tanjung Rambutan perception. So I feel that right now the how to say, the community is much more aware about what's going on in mental health. So I really appreciate like organizations like yours, SoFal, like the avenue that is available online. It's able for students or even for any age group to get aware about what is like mental health and how they can actually start early to detect if there's any sort of symptoms to prevent them to actually get into that a worse stage, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
I
And
think
I think
that's
also another thing I want to add before we
mm,
wrap up is that
sure.
the language that we use as well, right? I mean, like we tend to have this thing, why you depressed? Cheer up lah, get over it, or like toughen up or something like that. That doesn't help, right?
Mhm.
So as a society, we need to be more empathetic. When people come to us with problems, if you say things like, just suck it up or something like that, they will be less likely to come to you in future. And you don't want that.
Yep.
You want to know when somebody needs help. So the better way to do is, okay, like tell me more about that. Just come from a place of curiosity and empathy to want to
Mhm.
find out more and give them a
Yep.
space to talk about it, and just don't be judgmental. That would be a huge shift in terms of
Mhm.
supporting people and breaking down this taboo around mental health.
Exactly. So like when you mentioned, I mean, about the interaction, society interaction, so this is also a form like social how to say, emotional support, if you can actually get someone to actually understand, to actually listen to you. So like what is happening right now, everything is on the pandemic, everything is virtual and all, the social interaction is not really there. So it's like decreased in a way so that students or even people in general, they don't have that emotional support. So to the audience that is here today, we would really appreciate that if, let's say, you have any friends that you can reach out to just to let them know about how, even ask them just random questions just to check up on them, so that they can be aware about, oh, you actually have like interaction that we can be doing during this pandemic as well, so that you can keep them in place, or to just give them some emotional support, if I may add. I think that's all for what we have today for the time. Ms. Chalky, do you have any maybe final advices that you want to share to our audience today? And we can just wrap
Yeah,
up the session.
yeah. So I think for the students who are those who are thinking of pursuing a psychology degree, I think there's one thing that I want you to think about right now that most people probably won't tell you. Okay, in choosing what you want to specialize in, it's also important to think where you want to practice, because in different countries, the professional bodies have different requirements about your registration. And as part of that registration, they will need to see evidence that you've studied certain types of modules, or your course has been accredited by certain types of bodies. So it's really important for you to be across that now. So for example, if you plan to go to study somewhere like, for example, University at Buffalo, right? But you intend to practice in Malaysia or in Singapore, it's really useful to find out right now, like what your professional body, the body that you will be registered with, requires in terms of your qualification. Because for you to be registered as a practicing psychologist with them, they will need certain types of criteria in terms of how long you've trained as this, whether you've covered specific modules. So like deciding a career path is not only the only thing you need to figure out, you also need to figure out where you want to practice, so that you can actually make sure that what you're studying allows you to qualify and register in the domicile that you want to practice in. So that's really important. And I want all the students to keep that in mind.
Mhm. Okay. All right. Thank you, Ms. Chalky, for your time today. And I hope everyone would be able to actually reach out to Ms. Chalky through SoftHealth, or even TryWell in future next week, so that they can actually know more about the services that they provide. You can also maybe reach out to drop in an email in terms of like if you want to intern with them, if you want to seek for any opportunity with them, you can reach out to them directly. So let me just share screen a little more so that we can actually just wrap up the session. A lot of things to maneuver. Paise.
Yeah, it's okay. You know what? I have this theory, right? Your computer works
Uh-huh.
fine most of the time, but when you need to show people something, right? That's when it starts to act up, like system doesn't
Exactly.
work, very slow, and
They
all that
find
kind
it
of stuff.
ways to actually like mess up the whole session
Yeah,
for
for
us.
sure.
Yeah.
Then the rest of the time it's fine. The rest of the time it runs beautifully. The moment you need to show your boss something or you need to do a presentation, things start
Exactly.
to hang and freeze and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. But safe to say, Miss Chucky, just now your slides, we all can actually see the slides. So no
Good,
worries about that.
fantastic.
lah.
Thank you.
So
Thanks so
anyway,
much.
yeah, these no worries. So these are the details of SoFhealth, and they're also going to be rebranding themselves to Thrive Well. So you can just search online, reach out to their Facebook, Instagram, all these different avenues to know more about them. Okay, so just a final part from us. We actually having this Career Month series another 3 weeks. So we have different topics upcoming. So the timing and also the days are different. So this particular psychology career talk is basically on Friday. So the next subsequent 3 weeks is on Sunday, and it's from 10 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. So it's in the morning, 10 a.m. to 12:30 noon. All right. So that being said, thank you so much for your time, everyone, and I hope to see you guys next week. Thank you, Miss Chucky. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Yao. Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Take care.